But I thought maybe we could start actually with having our panel ask some questions, and we'll start with Mr. Santee.
Well, let me just start by saying, in case you've forgotten, part of my role here is I run a nonprofit that works in the economic development arena. So my interest really in transportation infrastructure is where are people going and why are they trying to get there? And are there things that they want to do at either end? And it sounded to me today like most everybody is going to basketball games. I don't know what the economic development benefit of that is, but it does lead me to make a comment about Connecticut Fast Track, which is being designed to move people from New Britain to Hartford, apparently so they can go see their baseball team play.
You're in good form, Bob.
But that's not just meant to be funny. And I will relate it to my earlier comment. I think in Connecticut, what we haven't done very well in the past is join transportation planning with land use planning, with economic development planning. And it's something we need to do a better job of. And what I heard this morning from our panelists, and Mayor, thank you for coming back because I'd certainly want to hear your comments on this, is you need political will to get these things done. And you need a really good communications plan. But I also heard that there, in some instances, there was some land use planning, that there was a desire to move people more quickly to maybe areas where there, that we were going to use transit to drive development. And I just wondered, particularly in the San Diego and Miami instances, how much land use planning came into your decision making, particularly on the part of chief elected officials?
Sam, do you want to start?
Sure. So I guess the first thing to be clear, SANDAG does not have control over land use, but we do work closely with our member agencies in the cities as the Council of Governments to incorporate their land development plans into what we are doing. So we do have a smarter approach today than we had 20 years ago. I think all our regions are talking about that. So we have what we call our smart growth plan. So we do try and closely align our transportation investments to maximize their efficiency and try and get our city agencies, our partners, to focus their development in a more concentrated manner. That not only helps with the design and construction of our highways, but also with promoting the increased use of transit.
Okay, I'm not sure. Well, it's probably a Deborah question, but from the MPO standpoint, I think the decision was made. And it was made before I got on there. Was that we wouldn't develop in a way that would displace people anymore. And you to know the history of Miami-Dade County in a while. When they expanded, I think it was 395 or 195. Yeah, on 995. They essentially destroyed the black community. It was the historic Overtown community. And so they ran this big expressway right through it. And it displaced an extraordinary number of people, and it really crushed what had been the thriving black community of South Florida. So and the decision was made that we would not do that again. And so because South Florida was not particularly, well, we weren't planned well. So our expressways and our major roadways go through areas that are essentially landlocked by residential and business areas. There's not a lot we can do in that respect. And we just formalized that as a policy decision, that we're not going to displace these communities anymore to benefit transit. And that itself is a big policy decision, because then it says that we know we have to do some other things. We have to look at, rapid, the light rail and the rapid bus movements and all. We have to look at those other things now, because we know that we're not going to ride 995 anymore through the black community.
And let me just weigh in on that. And I'm going to weigh in at two levels here. One is the immediate project level. And I said with this, our congestion relief study focusing on congestion pricing type options is essentially merged with the viaduct design and replacement study. And I think in answer to Bob's questions about that, that is where a lot of the land use issues are very deliberately being considered. And Bob Painter, you might want to respond to that. That is a very conscious effort on the part of the design team and the advisory committee that's working with them to account for those kind of land use and development opportunities as they lay out the design for that. So that certainly is part of the Viaduct project. In a more general level, at a higher level, I think the state as a whole is coming around to looking at things from a very different perspective. As we as a state DOT move forward with another project at this time called Transform CT, which is a strategic plan for transportation for the state. Key element of that is to work with the other state agencies and really develop a policy for transportation or strategy for transportation that is tied directly to some of the other state objectives in terms of the plan of conservation and development and the state economic development strategy as well.
Thank you. Dr. Painter, did you have a question?
First of all, I'd like to say that this has really been very informative. It's been useful having read about, for example, San Diego and LA and Miami before the folks came to talk about it. It gives it a different perspective. And the thing that I think I come away with is how important the holistic looking at congestion pricing is. It's not just congestion pricing. It's transit, it's rail, it's whatever. And I was interested in what some of the panelists might say about trucking. A lot of the pictures that you showed didn't show very many trucks. We don't have a good rail system in Connecticut to deliver goods, so we depend heavily upon the trucking industry to deliver goods, and we have a huge number of trucks on our highways. Some people have said that trucking ought to pay more because they wreck the highways. On the other hand, trucks deliver goods to places that benefit us all. So several of you mentioned fairness. I wonder how you deal with trucking in your states. Is it treated differently?
I'll go ahead and start. I'm sure others have more to offer. The department did make a policy decision shortly after we developed 95 Express, and we actually developed a managed lane action plan, if you will. And one of our decisions was that express lanes would, as a general rule, not include trucks. There is one exception, and that's I-595. But the other facilities are intended specifically to prevent truck traffic. Part of that is to ensure quality traffic flow by not mixing a lot of different vehicle types. It's one of the things that actually our consumers said to us. We don't like being mixed in with trucks. That having been said, I think there's clearly a recognition that movement of goods by freight is really important. We have in Southeast Florida 2 major ports of entry, the Port of Miami and Port Everglades. And these 2 ports provide a lot of goods into the community. So we have made other kinds of investments into freight. We continue to look at studies to better provide for the needs of freight, particularly as you move into the central business district area. But we also, some of you may be familiar with the Port of Miami Tunnel. And that job was recently opened or recently celebrated. We're working on a few punch list items to get that project open. But essentially, the tunnel connects the Port of Miami to the interstate system. It does not provide a direct connection to the express lanes, but it was intended to facilitate freight movement. Freight's important, and I think we can't lose sight of the fact that freight is important, and you have to account for it. I don't think we had in Southeast Florida any less or any more freight traffic than you would have in other parts of the country, and so our strategy worked for us and would likely work in other areas. I would imagine.
Craig, did you have?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about this. So obviously, Washington State, we're a major port. We're probably the 3rd biggest port area in the United States with a lot of Asian goods coming in. One of the things that's interesting, one of the two facilities I didn't talk about are actually called the Puget Sound Gateway Project. It's getting to the Port of Tacoma and Port of Seattle, and also ties into air freight coming into SeaTac Airport. And the freight industry, the shippers, the ports have been very supportive of that. And actually, that's the #1 project list before our legislature right now, and that would have tolls contributing towards it. So again, they see the value. The other comment is interesting is we have a lot of agricultural in eastern Washington, a lot of fruit, goods of that nature. And a lot of the people there, orchardists and the trucking, say it takes them as long to get to the edge of an urban area than it does to actually get to the urban area. And so they're saying, hey, time is money. I've been supportive from that standpoint. So that's been our general view. When you get down to the idea of an express toll lane concept, I think probably similar to maybe some of the other panelists here, if you can make the general purpose lanes work better because the express lanes are working better, then there is a general raising of the whole tide for everybody that helps. The one thing that we are looking at, and we're going to probably be doing this through the Department of Transportation, is raising the 10,000 gross vehicle weight in an HOV lane up to about 18,000 for our express toll lanes to allow more of the high value goods, but they're probably still going to be FedEx, UPS type trucks that can get around from that standpoint. So those are a couple of the perspectives that we've taken with freight.
Yeah, I think there are different perspectives or answers to your question depending on the transportation solution, right? So we've always talked about there's no one box that fits everybody. So for managed lanes, at least in California, some of what Craig mentioned, they're more a beneficiary than they are a target. And that's because when it comes to dealing with congestion, it's really about volume of vehicles. So if we're trying to target a large number of vehicles to address congestion, in our perspective, it's better to try and move passenger vehicles over into the express lanes than a portion of the trucks that we could possibly move over. We're just going to have a bigger impact. In terms of the pricing piece you asked about, now for toll facilities in Southern California, trucks do pay a premium. So on the toll road in San Diego right now, they pay 2 times the fare of a 2-axle vehicle. Other toll roads, at least in Southern California, it can be up to 3 or 4 times the normal toll. But we're also looking at other studies in terms of managed lanes specifically for big rigs. So we're studying it. We haven't found any solution. And to be honest, a lot of those come down to, yeah, if we build this facility, then we talk to the industry, can you pay for it with tolls? And they don't get excited about that. There's only one example in San Diego where they are excited about that aspect, and that's our efforts to build a 3rd border crossing in San Diego because of the significant economic impact that is currently happening with 3 to 4 hour wait times for trucks trying to cross the border from Mexico into the U.S. So in those examples where we've talked about having a target of a 20-minute wait time, they see immediate business value, and they're like, yeah, if you can cut my wait from 3 hours to 20 minutes, yeah, I'll probably pay a $15, $20 toll for that.
Mr. Condon?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for terrific presentations all. 2 things. The discussion about tolls in Connecticut for the past dozen years or so has always been colored by federal restrictions. Have those opened up? I mean, I'm wondering if Connecticut could legally implement a toll program.
I'll answer that. We're actually doing both of these studies under the value pricing pilot program. As part of those studies, and when we were awarded the grant, we were awarded as a state the status of as one of 15 states nationwide that are designated value pricing pilot program states. As such, we can implement tolling on these 2 projects, interstates, as long as we're doing it as a congestion pricing project. That it's basically a pilot program that they put in place, I think under ICE-T probably, and now most of those 15 slots have been filled. We were one of the last, I believe, to get one of those slots.
Is that right, Ed?
But again, it's only if you're going to do congestion
You
pricing.
can't do it to raise money or anything, or without
Well, you
a
can
wink
raise
or a
money
nudge.
in the process, but that's not the prime. You have to be varying the price of the toll by time of day so that you manage the peak period.
Good, thanks, Tom. Any do panelists have any of that? Was that an issue?
Maybe I can talk to that a little bit. Basically, they've mainstreamed the idea of adding a lane onto an interstate, and that lane could be priced. That it no longer even requires a federal agreement. That's just now part of what they do going forward with it. The comments are absolutely right. Well, I mean, we're one of the 15 states that has that. One of the interesting things that we're doing, we have Interstate 90. We are now looking at the question of maybe express lanes on it. Shouldn't be a real problem to convert, HOV over at that. But we're also looking at controlling all lanes. And to do that, we're working through an environmental impact statement process. It will take an act of the legislature to put that in place. It will actually also take action by Federal Highway Administration to come to a toll agreement with us. And to my understanding, only Virginia in the area down there by Portsmouth is only one that actually has an interstate where they are taking tolls on that to help build another tunnel and so forth. So it's still early in the idea of putting full tolling on an interstate, but it is doable. And then I'm reading the comments from Secretary Fox, who's now encouraging this more to go forward. So actually the trend seems to be more ability to allow investments into the interstate system.
Okay.
Mr. Coleman?
It's a lot of my questions have been asked, but it strikes me that there is a sort of a confluence of a variety of situations that in all of your instances in terms of strong political will, a proactive Department of Transportation, and a situation that existed and alternatives in place and a legislature that would support you. And I guess what interests me particularly is how you had that political will at the start, and how you got legislatures that represented obviously municipalities and individuals from around your states to support that effort in your specific location.
Traffic was really bad.
Okay.
Traffic was horrible, and we drive like everyone else. We don't have helicopters or anything, so we drive, and traffic was bad, and people, when traffic gets bad and people get in a bad mood, and they get in accidents, and they're just grumpier. I mean, and that's what the elected officials also, and that's what your policymakers. And it's easy. How many of you all have ever been really hungry? Everyone's been really hungry at some point, right? So when you go to a restaurant or to the store and you're really hungry, you go while you're hungry. It's easy for someone to sell you something to eat because you're hungry. So it's a lot more difficult if you don't have a congestion problem to talk about all of these traffic solutions, because they aren't necessarily hungry for a solution. But it's a lot easier if you're a traffic professional and you're going to talk to a policymaker about congestion issues. If we're actually hungry for it, we've identified that we need something. So the need was there, and sometimes you need something, but you don't know you need it. Like you need to take your vitamins, but you don't know you need to take vitamins. This wasn't that type of passive need. This was a more in-your-face need. People need relief from congestion. They need to spend less time in their cars. They need to be happier in their commutes because it makes them happier in their life. It really is about talking to them about their quality of life and understanding that that's something that we can talk to our constituents about. I can explain to them why we're doing this and how it's going to make their life easier, because their commute's going to be shorter and it's going to be less frustrating. So,
Stephanie, do you have some insights?
Yes.
LA?
Yes. From the initial start, the political support we had was on our board, and it was principally because our board members understood the challenges we have with traditional transportation funding and the decline, and the opportunity to have an investment in our infrastructure from the federal government that we normally wouldn't have at that large sum. As we work to actually turn opposition from the local and state level to neutral, because neutral is a success, right? I wasn't looking to go from opposed to favor. Opposed to neutral is a success. The fundamental difference was when they understood that this wasn't just about pricing, that we actually were complementing transit, both rail and bus. Then they started to come along. The fact that our net toll revenue would be reinvested in transit started moving them from opposed to neutral, and those types of improvements made the difference.
Is that what got your BRT program going?
Absolutely. So we had bus service on the route, but our investment improved it to a BRT type service. So instead of a bus every 30 minutes during rush hour in the middle of a freeway, there's now a bus every 5 minutes during rush hour. It makes a huge difference.
That's the red line, is it? Or is it?
Silver line.
Silver line, right.
Actually, someone from the audience put this question. This might be particularly relevant for those from California. Did the clean air requirements in California, which seem to be more so than the rest of the country, did that play an additional role in making congestion tolling an important solution to look at?
Well, I think it's always played a role, but I guess the visibility has gotten bigger. I think all our regions, at least in California, we always focused on air quality even before, Senate Bill 375, I believe it was, went into effect. But now we have to show it how we're addressing it more in our plans and have specific targets. But, our overall strategies, we're already focused on that. So I can't say that, at least for Sandag in our region, it's not like we completely changed the strategy that was in our regional transportation plan before and after 375. The major projects are still the same. We were still looking at express lane type corridors on all our major facilities. So that approach didn't change much. I think some of the phasing we're looking at is a little differently in terms of the rate we bring on transit projects. But again, for us, especially in the example Stephanie talked about, BRT, we can't have an effective BRT without express lanes. So you can't decouple that. Again, but that goes back to our point of having comprehensive solutions. You have to look at mobility as a whole, not, there aren't any magic pills. We're going to take this pill today or that pill tomorrow. You got to look at them together.
For us, clean air is important, but it was not persuasive in terms of addressing whether or not we should move forward with this project. The general public and legislators wanted us to look at other alternatives, but when you're dealing with pricing for us, it was about fundamentally dealing with concerns about double taxation, do something else, but the clean air argument wasn't compelling.
Another question from the panel?
Well, it's a quick one. Does there ever, we talk about the finite amount of space on highways, and you can't, I remember James Howard Kunstler's line about I-95 in Florida. He said you couldn't see the Kmart on one side from the Walmart on the other because of the curvature of the earth. Does there come a point when the express lanes get full? Or can these strategies keep it in some kind of balance?
Would like to take that one.
I'll take it.
Good.
If you have the ability to manage demand through pricing, then the express lanes should be able to be managed so that they're operating at a free flow condition. A lot of, I think few of us actually have no maximum toll rate. There are a few that, their elected officials have agreed that there's no need for a maximum, that the strategy is going to be purely market driven. Others of us, like in Florida, we do have a maximum toll rate. And we were experiencing some challenges, again, because the facility was, wildly successful. We were experiencing some challenges with the maximum toll rate not really being able to help us manage demand. And we were bumping up against it periodically. So we went back and we modified our rule, gave ourselves a little bit of breathing room, increased the max rate from $1 a mile to $1.50 a mile, and then built in certain triggers into the rule itself, where if you bump up against the max X number of times per month and so many consecutive months in a row, that there would be an automatic adjustment to the max rate. I mean, I think the question is, you know, is it possible, even with congestion pricing and managed lanes and all of these other strategies, to you know, to have demand outstrip your ability? And I mean, yeah, that's possible, right? But that again, then I think we talk about the connection between land use and transportation and making responsible decisions and making investments in the places where we need to make investments so that you're not outstripping your ability to provide the mobility service that your communities demand.
Craig, what did you see?
Yeah, I wanted to maybe talk about the bold vision that we have. Puget Sound Regional Council is our metropolitan planning organization for the four-county area there, and similar to the functions that SANDAG does. What's interesting is that short term is what Deborah's talking about. Yes, we can price on the short term. What happens 30 years, 40 years down the road? And so we've adopted a Transportation 2040 plan in the region that tried to balance greenhouse gases, because we actually have a state law that talks about reducing greenhouse gases and BMT. We also have federal EPA, where we have endangered species of salmon, so water quality to us is a huge thing. Every piece of water coming down through Puget Sound is critically important. We have a Growth Management Act for land use, and we have urban boundaries, and our MPO has to plan on the land use and their economic development to keep Boeing and Microsoft and all those industries going and so forth. And we've looked at the alternatives for transportation, which what if you invest it all in the highways, or what if you invest it all in the transit? You can't build your way out of this either way. It was only when you started bringing pricing into the equation you started seeing a balance of all of these factors coming in. And what that resulted in 2010 was adoption of the long-range transportation plan as a stakeholder, as a marker out there to say, where are we going? And with that, yes, we can have express toll lanes and new capacity tolled up to 2030, but by 2040, we're talking about all highways being fully tolled, all lanes. And that was the only way that we could get to a system that balanced itself. With that came some interesting things. The gas tax goes away. Basically, you start using the road user price as that. 40% of that would go to transit for transit operations. But that's, like I said, it's a bold statement out there. The fun story with that is that it was almost unanimously passed by the 72 voting members, jurisdictions in the region, and only 2 mayors voted against it. So we have our mayor here. We had one mayor of a very small city west of Puget Sound who said, I really don't like this concept. And then we had the mayor of Seattle who said this didn't go far enough. And so we was very supportive. Now, does the public understand that? Not at all. So we're on this journey to say, where do we go? But that became more of that long range. How do you deal with that ultimate question of where we're going?
How enforceable is that?
It's a land use plan from the standpoint of you have federal guidance, obviously, how the MPOs are given and how dollars come in. But again, it's land use, and the way our Growth Management Act sets up, they have to certify all the land use plans and coming together. Now it comes down to our regional transit agency. Are they going to implement things along that? And the board, are they going to follow it? Will the legislature follow it? But again, if you don't have things that are certified by that, then there's checks and balances. The key then comes back to maybe your question you asked, which is how do you bring that local initiative, that regional initiative to the legislature? And I think, again, it's showing them how did you get there. And I think it's also with the legislature, they're more of it, what's happening every 2 years? What's the next incremental step that we're going to take?
Sam, did you
Sure.
have a response?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you asked about in terms of the highway footprint and how much room we have, that is a very hard reality for San Diego. I mentioned the I-15 Express Lanes corridor, and we just completed expansion of that at $1.4 billion. We've made it clear that that's it. That thing can't get any wider. The cost alone to make it wider, it would just be infeasible. It's in a canyon, right? You know, those of you familiar with the topography of San Diego, it's just tons of mountains, and all our freeways are either right on the coast or in a canyon. Definitely when it comes to expanding on the coast, That's just not going to happen. Concepts like double decking, those just don't fly in California coastal communities. LA might be able to pull off some of that, but I think it would still be a heavy lift even in LA. But we just don't have those options. So again, you have to go back to looking at comprehensive solution, pricing, using economic factors such as pricing to continue to manage that, ride sharing, transit, but then we also have to look at technology. So if we know that footprint can't get any better or get any larger, how do we maximize the use of that footprint? This is another area Sandag spends quite a lot of time and investment on looking at technologies. There's stuff out there where, and I think Deborah talked about it yesterday, our typical lanes are 12 feet wide. Our average cars are about 5 to 6 feet wide. So we need all that extra space now because we're humans and we suck at driving. So
you too.
we're just not good at it. And also humans are very poor with depth perception going at high speeds. So when we look at technologies that are now being employed today where cars can use less space on the width and definitely drive closer together, now we can change that theoretical throughput from 2,000 vehicles an hour to maybe 3,000 vehicle hour. So now we're moving more people. You can take the example we always talk about for I-15 specifically. We've got 5 lanes along most of the corridor. Those lanes are 12 to 13 feet wide. If we can take 2 feet from each of those lanes, we can create another lane.
So this gets to a question in the audience was, if lanes get narrower and perhaps what happens to shoulders, and how does this affect larger vehicles such as trucks, or what has been your experience?
Yeah, so we're always going to have to accommodate trucks, right? Because they need to be larger. But trucks are the first ones using some of this technology because of the way they need to operate. You know, trucks are definitely a lot wider than cars, so they don't have as much buffer. So that industry has already been employing some of these technologies to help their drivers stay safe and remain within a lane. We're going to have to figure out how we handle those trucks. And I forgot, what was the first part of that question?
Shoulders.
The shoulders. In my opinion, I think we need to look more at the European model. Shoulders have a purpose, and that's for safety and to be able to manage incidents. Maybe we should look more at what Deborah was talking about having rapid incident response plans, because for the majority of time, we've got a lot of real estate in shoulders that's going to waste. So maybe we have to think about that differently as well, because again, we've got to maximize that existing footprint we have, or continue to spend billions of dollars trying to build our way out of this.
Another question, Doctor?
Yeah, I was interested in the mechanics of the monitoring, because I'm not hearing anyone say that everyone has to have a what we call an easy pass. I don't know what you call it. So does everyone have to have one of those gadgets? Number 2 is we hear a lot about privacy issues and mistakes in billing of those who have sailed through a red light, for example, and get sent either a ticket or a bill. How do you deal with sending money to getting money from people who have sailed through who don't have the little gadgets? I guess it's sort of build on that answer any way you want to.
How do you deal with it? Stephanie, you want to start with this one?
Okay. For our operation, every vehicle does need to have a transponder or equivalent to your Easy Pass. Our transponder actually has a switch on it, so you can self-declare how many people are in your vehicle. That's how ours operates. From a privacy perspective, our state legislature has required strict privacy protection for all of our toll customers statewide. However, during the public outreach process, I did not actually hear a lot of concerns about privacy. You can go to Jack in the Box now and you're on camera. Maybe it's just the time, but because of our privacy requirements in state law, we do allow anonymous accounts, and we've only had one open up, right? And in terms of violation notices, we too have had the trouble with the red light photo experiment, so much so that it's no longer allowed. However, with our violation notices, the vehicle's detected in the lane without the transponder, then we take a picture of the license plate and does an automatic lookup. And the driver receives a notice in the mail in terms of the registered owner of the vehicle. Now, our requirement on that notice is we have to include a photo of the vehicle, and it gives opportunity for the customer to protest or appeal and indicate if they think that that violation notice has been sent in error.
So Deborah, what about in terms of express lanes and transponders?
On 95 Express, and also our policy moving forward for all express lanes, is that users need to have a transponder. We will not do toll by plate on express lanes. That decision was made because drivers do have the option of using the general purpose lanes. So our strategy is to require all the users to have a SunPass account, and those who don't have a SunPass account or sent violation notices, they can quickly become customers and SunPass users by immediately converting their violation into an account. And that's something that we work very closely with them on. We have really excellent customer service support for our SunPass users, and we also provide a lot of customer support for our registered carpoolers. As far as privacy issues are concerned, like Stephanie mentioned, the records of our SunPass owners are exempt from public record disclosure. We've actually taken that a step further on those toll roads, not express lanes, but on those other toll roads where they do toll by plate. That information is also exempt from public records requests. So we do ensure the privacy of our users. We do allow SunPass accounts to be loaded with cash. You don't have to have a credit card to have a SunPass account, and it can be anonymous, and we do have more than one anonymous account holder. And so really, to be honest with you, that hasn't been a concern. One of the things, and I don't know that I really did it justice in my brief presentation, but there were a lot of conditions precedent, if you will, that led to the success of 95 Express, and I don't want to understate those, because having that foundation is really what helped us move forward so quickly and effectively. We have a long history of successful tolling in Florida. We also have a very long successful history of commuter assistance programs in Southeast Florida. We also had a long history of transit service along this particular corridor. And so we had a lot of things that were already in place. So people were not unfamiliar with tolling or with SunPass accounts or the process that they needed to go through for that. We already had extremely high penetration rates of our SunPass accounts in the area. So those things all really helped facilitate the success that we experienced.
Craig, before Sam, so you mentioned in your presentation that, like Connecticut, you did have tolls and they went away.
Right.
How did that?
Well, we definitely had tolls that went away, and then bringing it back was something we had to do a huge education. And anything that's with tolling or pricing, half the project is education, marketing, how to use it, what the benefits are going to be as you go forward with it. So we had a major campaigns and earned media, lots of media coverage with this big change. So I have to anticipate that. To your question a little bit, we're actually looking at this as a system because we have bridges and tunnels and express toll lanes, and the customer doesn't really care what road they're driving on at what particular time. Right. Your frequent users are going to have a good to go pass. I mean, 96% of one of our communities has a good go pass, which is your easy pass. It's just way of life, and it's automatic and set up. But if you're going across the bridges, like I said, 83%, 80% of those vehicles have that. It's your infrequent users, the ones that come in, and sometimes we kid about people coming in for a football game or whatever it might be. We do a pay by mail. So we'll take a picture of your license plate, we'll look up Department of Licensing, and we will then send a bill out, and we'll send a second bill out, and after 80 days you don't pay that, then you stop becoming a customer, and now we put a $40 penalty on it. But we do that for all states, and we're doing that for the provinces. It's interesting. Arizona and Connecticut were two of our difficult states to deal with. I don't know what that means, but we are working with our Washington State Patrol on that. Now, I'm not too worried about Connecticut plates out in Seattle, but I have had some Micronesia plates, and I don't know how the heck they got their car on our bridge. But we do have that, and we will use the pay-by-mail process on our express toll lanes because, again, we don't want you driving across one bridge, being a good customer, taking a left turn, and then becoming a violator and getting hit. They're going to say, what? What happened? We need to be very consistent with our customers and treat them as customers.
Tell me how you deal with tourists. How about rental cars?
That's always one of the questions we have. Rental cars are interesting because there are third-party companies who will just take care of you as a rental car. They'll charge you, and they'll be the interface for it. They'll pay us our fee, and then they go back to the rental car company. It works. We also have a certain situation where you can set up a short-term account for 14 days. Grandma's coming for Thanksgiving. She doesn't want to hassle with it. I just pay for her, and you just put your credit card down, and when we see that license plate, you just bills directly to that. And British Columbia is also doing a similar situation to that also.
We do the same. Very similar in Florida.
Any other questions?
This has been a marvelous presentation by all of you, but I guess if you had to give one single message to us here in Connecticut, one specific thing, what would it be?
Want to start, Mayor?
Well, consistent with what I said previously, I would define the problem in a very human way. You're probably more than 50% there when you define the problem. If the problem is well defined in a way that they understand it's a problem, whoever the they is, if it's voters, if it's policymakers, if it's the governor, whoever the they is, you define the problem in a way that they really get it. So once you define that problem and they realize it's a problem, we're pretty good about sacrificing to solve problems that we identify as problems. A lot of times, though, we don't do that. We define a problem from an academic standpoint, and it can really be a problem. But you should have just said, listen, you're going to be spending 5 hours less a week in your car. If you're going to spend 5 hours less a week in your car, that means if you're a business person, you get to be more productive. If you're a family person, you get to spend more time with your kids. Whatever it is you want to do, that's 5 hours of your time you can do it with. We can fix it and make it that way.
Sam, what was the one thing you would?
Be comprehensive and forward-thinking.
Deborah?
I think, well, it's hard for me to say one thing. But I think the one thing I would say is consider the alternative to solving this problem. What's the no build? And then think about that. I think that's kind of a scary situation and a scary scenario. And, not taking anything off the table. Everything needs to be given its consideration. And there are lots of little strategies that can work. So consider the alternative to doing what you need to do to address your problem. It's not a good scenario.
Craig?
Well, they took three good ones. So maybe I'll add into it. Just realize, yeah, poor Stephanie.
Basketball.
So yeah, I think you have to realize, look at the long haul. Where are you going? But also, this is going to be a long conversation. For us on Interstate 405, it's been a 12-year conversation. And even with that, our legislature was a little bit cautious and they've given us conditions. But it came with identifying the problem, know what your needs are, what the options could be, and then being able to have people involved and part of that process. What I thought was amazingly effective there was, we had executive committees, I mentioned, state legislators, commissioners, local mayors. They started owning the problems and looking at the solutions. We had the citizens group, from the mall owner to the Sierra Club type to every aspect. They started seeing what the choices were, and you had the staff. And amazingly, it was the senior staff, the most conservative, because they're the ones that didn't want to get too far out on the ledge here. So the planners and the public works directors were the ones who were most conservative in this discussion. It was the citizens and the electeds who were leading this conversation, but realizing it takes a lot of education and going through the steps in that buy-in process.
Stephanie?
I think my key message would be to tailor the concept to your unique needs. What you'll find is, as Tom put up on the map, there are a number of these in operation across the country. None of them operate exactly the same. You try to take the best given your particular needs and see if you want to apply them here, but that's what I would encourage you to do.
We have time for one more question. I know Mr. Santi had a question.
Yeah, I'm going to go back, I guess. I guess one of my takeaways, and I think this has been just great as far as the dialogue, is the emphasis on education and communication. And, you know, maybe that's not a surprise, but I'd be interested in some definition around that. What's the magnitude of the educational and communication programs that you're talking about, and how are you funding them?
Well, not unlike what you're doing here, a lot of these things start off with a small study, and you start reaching out, and you find merit in what you're doing, and then you expand that to a further broadening of, well, like an environmental impact statement, something of that nature. So there is a little bit of a growing as you go, but it's been funded through typically projects or improvements that are needed. There's education, and there's education, there's education. There is the beginning, working with electeds and communities, focus groups, surveys, public opinion polls, things of that nature, seeing how people would move. But as you get close, all of a sudden you've changed from making the policy decisions. Now you're actually getting customers. You're launching a product, and they have to know how to use the product and why that product is out there and how it can benefit them. And that's the other part of the education, which is when we started going forward, it is absolutely critical on day one you got a successful launch and people are in their accounts good to go. The worst thing to do is have an empty lane sitting there with nobody using it. And we have goals that on day one we want at least 50% of our users on a bridge having everything set up. So there's all those aspects, I guess, of education.
Stephanie, go ahead.
I'd just like to add the importance of academia. They were critically important to us because I found, at least in Los Angeles County, the university and community college level, you had noted academics who believed in the congestion pricing concept. And so when I was called for interviews by radio stations and TV for debates, it was great that academia would show up and they would also help support the concept. So I would just add them to any core education approach.
In San Diego, it's been going on for 2 decades. What's been this case there?
Yeah, for us, I think the key was our initial pilot program, and then communicating how successful that was. If you can communicate a win in your own region, and you build upon that, it's kind of hard. Our debate last night. The Heat has won the last 2 years, so it's kind of hard to say they won't win again.
You can try.
You can try. You can try.
You couldn't try last night. You couldn't try last night. Stephanie tried. She's a Lakers fan.
But that aspect that Craig mentioned is just as important. So communicating and getting the project going is great. And once you get your project on the ground, the communication doesn't end. You have to remember, this is a consumer product at the end of the day. So informing folks on how they use your product, how they buy your product, how they access your product is critical to your success.
And I think, Sam, you touched upon it in your presentation. You're constantly evolving. And because you're constantly evolving, there is a need to continuously provide information to your customers so that they know you've tweaked this, you've adjusted that, this is a new option, this is a new choice. So the communication can't end because you're constantly making improvements. The way we paid for it, there was a lot of sweat equity by people like me and folks who work for me and folks who I work for. A lot of sweat equity into doing our own PowerPoints and making presentations and doing the call-in radio and community TV. But we also are using part of the toll revenue to support a larger contract to operate our traffic management center, where we have dedicated operators just for our ramp metering and our express lanes. So we use toll revenue to support our ongoing efforts. There were big commitments made up front, and at the time they seemed ginormous, and frankly they weren't big enough. But you have to be willing to make that investment, because you can't afford failure. The alternative to success is just too awful. And you want to have a job that succeeds so that you can build the next one and offer the same success to the next community. So you've got to make that investment at the very beginning with the outreach and marketing. You know, penny wise and pound foolish. It would be really dumb not to spend the money that you need to up front there.